Feels weird. It's been a while.
It's been like over 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Welcome back, guys. We're back. My name's Austin.
I'm Sarah.
This is the Cypress and Sparrow Homestead. So since we've made our last video, which was over 3 months ago, we've had a decent number of new friends join the channel. So in today's video, we wanted to kind of do a little bit of our story, but then talk about the topic of what it actually takes to move from the city to the country, from the city life to a more slow homesteading life, because that is one of the most common things that comes up in our comments is, what does it take to move from the city to the country? So our story is we got married in November of 2020. Things were kind of crazy, things were kind of wild. We were living in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and we knew that we wanted some space. We wanted some land. We wanted to attempt this homesteading lifestyle where we're growing our own food, we're trying to be self-sufficient in a number of ways. And so we decided to take the plunge, and we moved from the cities out to a tiny town in Wisconsin where we had no connections, onto a property with about 10 acres and a very modest house. And so far it's been amazing.
Okay, it's not that modest.
It's pretty modest.
But from suburban standards.
From suburban standards, it's a modest home. It's nothing crazy,
But
nothing
it's a
flashy.
cutie home.
It's a cutie home, yeah.
So one of our biggest motivators for wanting to get out of the city, so we were actually living in Hudson, Wisconsin in a little dark dungeon apartment at the time, and so I think that was actually a big motivator to get out of there. It was like slightly depressing, but we just like had this deep desire for a slower paced life, because I mean modern America, like, you know, it's so busy, it's go go go, and so I think that slow pace of life, and also just like getting back in touch with nature, which is so cliche, but our apartment was filled with like tables and trays of like tomato plant seedlings and whatnot at one point, and we're like, okay, I think we need some space, we need to garden. And there's something just so fulfilling about like having a dream and having it come true and actually doing it, and then like working with your hands was something both of us really desired too. And then when we thought about like a future, having a family, like raising kids out here away from the craziness of the city, I think those were some of our biggest motivators. Do you have any other things that made you kind of kick in the butt to get out here?
I think too, there's a very, and we'll probably play a part of this, and hopefully we try to be as authentic and transparent on this channel as we can, but I think there is something to, I almost say, romanticize country life of like, oh, it's just this like perfect flowing, like wonderful time, and there's never any problems, and that's certainly not the case, at least not for us.
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of like, oh, I wanted to see what this slow-paced, what this self-sufficient, what this homestead life was like. And so that was really, I think, the deciding factor of making us...
Like, we'll always wonder if we don't try.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If not now, then when?
Right.
One thing that is very important in our story, and it was very much by happenstance, by chance, by luck, if you will, is we were able to purchase this home at a very good time. If you know anything about the real estate markets in 2020 and 2021, interest rates were extremely low and prices hadn't quite yet skyrocketed. So we bought this house in January of 2021, and we were able to get an interest rate of 2.37%, which I know is unheard of now. So we feel very fortunate that we were able to get in at that time. And because of that, we were able to keep our monthly mortgage and our just kind of overall home payments very, very low. So we're gonna talk some more specifics about what it's actually like, what it actually takes to move from the city to the country. So one of the things that obviously is one of probably the biggest factor when making a decision like this, even if you don't want it to be, but it's money. How much things cost, how much a mortgage would be. Maybe if you're able to buy a home in cash, that's amazing. We were not. Oh, and by the way, we have a gate here, so our 9-month-old doesn't touch the hot furnace. Okay. So one of the things that we had to decide was money. You know, we had to save up money for a down payment on a home. We had to save up a little cushion for some of our initial purchases that we needed to make and projects. We had about $10,000 or so saved up for that kind of project buffer fund, if you will. And we did things like build our garden. We did things like doing some minor touch-ups in the house. We worked a little bit on our garage, so we were able to get electricity out there. And I think if you're gonna do a move like this, having that buffer, it's almost a necessity. You probably can get away with it and do things a little bit slower, but when you move to a property, you're gonna be so excited. Like we were so excited to get going, to start doing things, to start building, to start tearing old things down. And so being able to have that cash readily available is, like I said, it's almost a necessity. At least it was for us. Without a doubt, the number one question that we get on this channel is, how do you make your money? Are you making your money full-time on the homestead? Yes and no. So Sarah and I make our money from YouTube. I'm just kidding. We make our money from having remote jobs. So I work in the tech industry and Sarah is a web designer. Thankfully, we get to stay at home and do those jobs, so we're here full-time, but we certainly do not make our income from the property. That's one thing to consider when you're moving out to a country location. There's gonna be less jobs. Maybe you have a remote job yourself and you can do that and make that work, and that's fantastic. We were able to, and we have Starlink for internet if you're curious. But that's not always the case, and you might be in a field where you have to be in person and you have to be on a job site every single day. So that's absolutely something that you need to consider, because yes, you can make a living, you can make an income on a homestead. It's very challenging, I believe, and it's not right away. And so taking in consideration income and how you're making your money is, again, very important when making a decision like this. One other thing worth mentioning too is we don't necessarily have a goal to make an income from our property. We want to be able to take care of ourselves and maybe some friends and family, as far as like food-wise and some other self-sufficient activities that we do. But we don't have a desire to be full-scale farmers making all our money from selling produce, for example, or from raising meat or cattle. That's just not in our goals, and we would much rather be able to make our money online and be able to suit our needs here. So those are some money aspects that you need to consider, and let me know in the comments. We threw out the idea of maybe doing a more in-depth kind of like what it costs to run a homestead, what it cost us to get up and running. Let me know if that sounds like an interesting video idea, and maybe we'll make that this year. Sarah's gonna take the next one.
So another factor to consider when thinking about moving out to a homestead is your proximity to friends and family. So if you're someone who's really social, who sees their friends and families a lot, and your friends and family are in the city, like you're not going to be as close to them. It's not going to be as easy to get together with them. And so we moved about an hour and a half away from our home base, where my parents and Austin's parents are and where most of our friends are. And to us at the time, it wasn't a huge deal. We didn't have any kids. We just had chickens and stuff. So like we didn't have livestock to take care of if we wanted to go home, if we wanted to meet up with them. And so it wasn't too big a deal. But another consideration is if you don't have kids and you want kids in the future, you might want to be closer to your parents. That's one thing that for me, after having Gus, I wanted to be closer to home. And while I love where we're at and I don't think we're moving anytime soon, it would be really nice to be closer to our grandparents, just to go out for a date night or to have some help when I am working on a web design project or something like that. So that's just another thing that we didn't really think about until we had kids. One kid, Gus. And some people don't like their friends and family, they're not that close. So that's also, it might not matter to you. And then another thing along with that is community in small town is different. Usually it's great. Usually people are really friendly. So it is easy to connect with people, especially if you're part of a church or something. Like small town churches are very friendly and very welcoming. But a lot of times there's an older population in small towns too. So a lot of our connections are like older than our parents, which is kind of fun. But luckily we have met some friends like our age, but that's just something we didn't think about, is like there's not a lot of young people in small towns. Like the population does tend to be older, at least in Western Wisconsin. So yeah, all fun things to consider when you're thinking about moving to a homestead.
One more thing that you have to consider, and this almost goes without exception, is if you are in a more rural area, you're going to have less convenience options. For example, we live in a tiny, small town of less than 1,000 people. We have a coffee shop, thank goodness. We have a dollar store, and we have a gym and a gas station. Those are like the 4 areas.
And a couple of bars.
And there are a couple of bars. We don't frequent the bars. Actually, we haven't been to them, but those few areas is all we have within 15 minutes of us. If we want to go to the grocery store, we have to go a minimum of about a half hour to our Aldi or Walmart. And then that town has some other, has a Fleet Farm and a couple other like home goods stores. But half hour, that's pretty, I think that's fairly standard for some of the more rural areas. You might even be traveling further than that if you need to. And so keeping that in mind is you're not gonna have quick runs to late night Taco Bells that I would know nothing about, because I never do that ever. You're not going to have the easy convenience of certain stores that you might be accustomed to. We don't have a Target within an hour of us. So there are convenience factors that certainly you have to give up when moving from the city to the country. So that's convenience and a proximity factor. But there certainly are other convenience factors that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. We choose to heat our home with wood. And so during the summer months, we are constantly chopping wood to heat our home for the winter. Now we do have in-floor heating, but we like to heat our home with wood simply because it saves so much money every month.
And it's super cozy.
And it's very cozy to have a fireplace in your living room. But that comes at a cost of convenience. We don't just press a button to heat our home. We have to literally break our backs and sweat to be able to heat our home. Now, is that a choice that we make? Yes. But some people, maybe you might not have a traditional heating element, whether it's a furnace or in-floor heating or whatever. So that's just one example. There's little things like that you have to relinquish yourself and be okay with when you move from the city to the country. So one of the positive trade-offs though of these lack of conveniences is we live, like I said, we live about a half hour from the closest like major city, which is a city of like 30,000 people, so it's not even that big. But the trade-off, in a positive way in our opinion, is that we live in a very, very quiet area. We're on a dead-end road. Right now, if I were to walk outside, I'm not going to because it's -7 degrees, but if I were to walk outside, I would hear nothing, especially in the winter. It's just silent. Now that might freak some people out, but I love it. I love, especially during the winter, walking outside and just soaking in the silence is the best way that I could describe it. At night, walking outside, seeing a full sky of stars, it's unbelievable to see. And if you're not used to seeing that, the first few times I was just blown away by just the beauty that is out here. And we get to enjoy that at the cost of driving 30 minutes to a grocery store, at the cost of not being able to necessarily get everything delivered out here because we're a little bit off the beaten path. So I think convenience factors is something definitely that needs to be in consideration before you make your move. So the last thing that we wanted to talk about is just kind of the overall mindset shift that we had to make when we moved out here. Make no mistake, living a life where you're trying to grow your own food, where you're trying to be self-sufficient, you know, whether you're doing building projects or, you know, like the example I gave of heating your home with wood or whatever the case is, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And so that means going out in the early mornings or late at night when it's freezing cold out to feed the animals or change the water out. That means the example I said earlier, when it's 95 degrees out, going into your woods and chopping a tree down and cutting it up so that you can 6 months later have heat in your home. Those are examples, just little ones, but the overall mind shift the overall mindset shift that you have to have, that we had to make, was you're going to be uncomfortable sometimes, and there's going to be certain things that you do not want to do, but that doesn't matter because they need to be done. So to kind of recap the things that we talked about, you have to make sure the money is right. You have to make sure that everything lines up, because it is very easy to get into a place like this and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do all the things, and then you run out of money like that. We certainly, we're very glad, like I said, that we had that buffer, but it is not necessarily cheap to homestead. You can do it cheap, but if you still want to have some of those modern conveniences like a lawnmower or we got a UTV so that we could haul things across the property, like those cost money, those are expensive. So money was the big one. The convenience factor, like you're gonna be far away from things. And are you okay with that? Are you okay driving 30 minutes to a grocery store? Are you okay, additionally then, Sarah talked about friends and family. You know, we're an hour and a half away. For some people that might be not a lot of time away. You know, some people move across the United States or move wherever you're watching this from, move across the country. Some people an hour and a half, they couldn't imagine being that far away from friends and family. So keeping that in perspective of how far away and what connections do you have to that place that you're moving, if any. We didn't. We've made some, thankfully, but that's a huge consideration to take into when you are making a decision, like moving from the country or moving from the city to the country. And then last, like we just talked about, was just making sure you have the right mindset, because it's work, it takes a lot of effort, it's not easy, but it's worth it. Agreed. Like I said at the beginning, my name is Austin.
I'm Sarah.
This is the Cypress and Sparrow Homestead. We are on a journey to become as self-sufficient as we can. And so we make these videos, and now we're going to start making these videos more often, just kind of documenting our process to that goal. If you have an idea, if you have any videos that you would like to see, please drop them in the comments. We love to get video ideas. We make pretty much as much as we can. We make ideas from the comments. So again, thanks for watching. This is what it takes to move from the city to the country. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.